Hello, and welcome to the Journey of Grief, Becoming Us Without Them. And today I've invited Mary Kennedy to be with us. And Mary's going to tell us about her work as it relates to the idea of grief. So, Mary, welcome. And what would you like us to know?
Thanks for having me today, Barbara. It's an honor to be on this channel with you in conversation. The theme and idea of grief is paramount, actually, in my work and in life as being part of the human experience with others. Um, I'll introduce myself as Mary Kennedy. I am a mom. I am a wife. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I am a good friend. I'm a sister. I'm a professional colleague to many. I am a community member in the city where I live, which is San Francisco, and where I work. I'm a daughter. I am a niece and a cousin, and I am a helper. I will share about the helping part of who I am and what I do with my time. Professionally, I am a clinical social worker and was trained in the field of addiction, treatment, and recovery. I was also trained in the field of mental health and social justice and supporting and caring for disenfranchised and marginalized peoples in the United States and in whatever city or town I'm living and working in. I say that because I've been at this work a long time. This is my third decade, actually coming up on 30 years that I've been doing this work next year. I also am a psychotherapist now. So I have a private practice in San Francisco and have for many years. It is a traditional therapy practice where I see people in the office, which is where I'm sitting, as well as through telehealth, Zoom, phone calls, and I provide therapy. When I say that, I certainly know that I have training and experience and lived experience with wisdom around how to be a therapist. That said, I am a therapist that really accepts people to be where they are in the experience, that they come in and they guide the work for themselves. It is their time, it is their interest, it is their money, it is their perhaps motivation to want to work with somebody and partner with somebody in this type of help. There are many types, of course, as we know, as helpers in the community. This is one of them. So we talk about things that are deep. We talk about families. We talk about the families that we've come from, the cultures we've come from. We talk about the families that we've created in our adult lives or in our young adult lives. We talk about changes that are happening, things in life that are scary, uncertain, loss and grief being a part of that. In my specialty, which I'm known for and which I've done for those 30 years in the field, there's a lot of talk and conversation and wondering and exploring about people's relationships to drinking and other drugs and the compulsive behaviors. Often, when people think about addiction, they think about or they may experience the devastation of when we come to a point in use or abuse of a substance that it's gone off the rails, people say, right? It's just the train has gone off the track and bad things are happening. Yes, that is real and that is true. And in my work, in my practice, I work with people who are wondering about that. They're not sure. They know that there's some kind of a problem, or that they drink or use drugs or have compulsive behaviors that are different than others, bigger than others, more powerful inside. And so I work with people around all of that. I also work with loved ones. I will often have folks coming to me who are really concerned and worried about a loved one who is drinking or drugging too much, or who is compulsive and out of control with their behaviors, or spending, or gambling, or digital use. And that list goes on in our culture, in contemporary culture. Um, the loved ones could be a partner or a spouse, a good friend, a colleague, an adult child, a parent. I also am known for, and I've been doing this all my career, working with children of those who are struggling with their own process difficulties, behavior difficulties, and drinking and drugging. So I work with adult children of addiction and those who identify as that's, I know that about myself. I grew up in that kind of a home or family, as well as teenagers whose parent or adult caregiver is struggling with drinking, drugs, or compulsive behaviors. Early in my career, I worked with children as young as preschool age, and I say the younger, the better. It's never too young to learn about and to understand, and then to live with the reality of the pain in life, because we all have it. It comes to us whether we want it to or not, including substance abuse, addiction, problem drinking and drugging, disordered compulsivity, we call it, as well as loss and grief. Um, I equally spend a lot of time in my professional life running and being the director of a program that I founded here in San Francisco called the Addictions Institute San Francisco. Its acronyms are AISF, and it was born out of a sister program that's located nearby in Silicon Valley in Menlo Park called the Addictions Institute. That institute was founded in the 1970s, and I've brought the same model and offerings to the community in San Francisco and around the Bay in 2024.
Wow.
We offer training and teaching and consultations for professionals in the field, whether folks are therapists or psychologists, psychiatrists, and what we call allied professionals, people who work in addiction treatment and recovery, who are outside of the scope of being a therapist. They may be counselors, they may be speech therapists, they may be yoga instructors or recovery and sober coaches. So I provide throughout the year teaching and training, workshops and presentations where I'm teaching about treatment and recovery. I also, through the Institute, have a team of therapists that work with us. We have a wonderful team of senior level, seasoned therapists who work similarly to the way that I do in the Institute, and we together receive interested people looking for therapy, looking for education, looking for consultation to understand and make sense of addiction and recovery, problem drinking and drugging, all of which include loss and grief.
Wow.
I love what I do. I've been doing it for a long time. I started doing it after I went to my own counselor decades ago when I was a teenager, and she was helping me. She was a place that I could speak, and she would not question, she would not judge. She was a listener and saw me for who I was and the pain I was in my own family with addiction. Once I started working with this particular therapist years ago, I said, I want to do what she's doing. I don't know how to get there, but I want to do that. I want to help and give back in that way, just like I've been given the opportunity to be helped. And thankfully, my parents knew enough to get help for me, the next generation in the family. And I was able to then cultivate that with a lot of support through the years of elders and mentors and people who have come before me to do what I do today. So I feel immensely grateful for that.
Wonderful. That's so great that somebody helped you go this way instead of that way. So let's just, all of that is amazing. It's so neat when people kind of um, don't just hunker down and take care of themselves, but try to change the world as well and provide more services for more people and more relief for more people from the pain of all of this. My first panel was 3 parents whose kids had died of what was either suicide or overdose or both. And it was really tough. And it was a long, long, long journey for them. It had been a long, didn't just happen overnight. And that was tough. So let's talk more specifically about grief. Like there's things to grieve inside of all of that. For them, it was just grieving. They were not going to have that happy, healthy, well-adjusted little TV family that where everybody lived happily ever after. And then there's the grief of people in new recovery who discover, oh, you have to leave your entire life. And that kind of comes in stages like, no, I can still hang out with my friends. Oh, now I realize I can hang out with some of my friends. Oh, now some of my friends are sober, but they're so damaged that they really hurt me. So I can't hang out with them either. And fighting the guilt of, oh, I think I'm better now. It's really hard for people to let the old life die without feeling like a creep.
Mhm, mhm. I will add an additional layer to what you're describing, Barbara, and you are spot on. We know enough, whether we are helpers in the field or we know people in our life who have let go of and who have released the active relationship with substances, the active relationship of drinking and drugging, the active relationship of compulsive behaviors, whether it be spending or sex or online betting or digital screen time and more. We know there are experiences that people have of the grief of letting go, of releasing it. And that's kind of a simple or maybe a kind of a kind way to say it because it doesn't feel so releasing and smooth when it's happening for people or for someone. It feels incredibly painful and frightening and uh, rageful often. People do not want to. One of the biggest messages that I hear from those who I've worked with through the decades when they are considering letting go of the relationship with the substance or the compulsive behavior, or they are starting to do that, it's happening. We called it abstinence. Abstinence, when they stop, the point of stopping or arresting the addiction. People don't talk about what ultimately comes, which is what you're describing, the letting go perhaps of friendships or places that were familiar and comforting, or travel or events that would have been familiar and comforting and traditional and ritualistic. People don't talk about that in the early days, weeks, and months of stopping the substance or the compulsive behavior. The fear that people talk about is the longing and the missing of the substance, which is the loss. I will no longer have that. I will never be able to take the drink. I will never be able to smoke the joint. I will never be able to get on my phone again in the same way. And the fear and terror, I might even say, the ratcheting up beyond fear, it's a form of fear, but it's on steroids, right? The terror that there's a massive loss there. the grief that might come with that. People talk about feeling worried that I'll never get out of bed, that the loss will be so grand that I won't be able to function, that anxiety will come in and I won't be able to think straight. The fear around the letting go and the loss is big and is real, I will say, for people that I work with and that I've worked with through the years. And I say that's a direct correlation to the experience of loss or anticipated loss.
It's exactly the same. When I listen, so my own experience when my husband died of just feeling completely like, where am I supposed to be? What's my schedule now? What am I supposed to pay attention to? Because that thing that filled up all the space around me was gone. And it's exactly the same. Even if they don't think about it that hard, it's exactly the same. Who am I now that I'm sober? What if people don't like the sober me? Like, well, what do I do with my time? What do I do for fun? And waking up in the morning thinking about your addictive behavior or substance, the seeking. Okay, now I wake up, my seeking mechanisms turn on, but I don't know what I'm supposed to seek. So it's exactly the same mechanism of your body has to completely rewire its experience of life. And people don't take that very seriously in addiction. They don't realize something died. And it's exactly as if your soulmate had died.
That's
And
right.
it feels the same. And that longing, we call them urges, but
Right.
people who are grieving call it longing. And it's the
Mhm.
very same part of the brain.
When I was experiencing my dad's long dying process in the late, let's see, 2010s, and then he passed in 2020 during COVID and not because of COVID. He was ill and he was older aged, which is ultimately what he passed from. I experienced the anticipation of the loss and the grief for a long period of time that changed over time. And there was no way for me to know, and then my family around me, my mother, my brother, and loved ones near to us, there was no way for me and us to know what was going to come in our grieving and loss process. And I was acutely aware of that at the time. And I could not have known, not only here intellectually, but emotionally in my gut, in maybe the spirit place or the heart place, and mentally with my own mental health, how that course would take, or what course that would take over time. I didn't know the details of it, and I let go of needing to know, which is something I will talk about later when we finish up also. I say that because when we're talking here about someone letting go or stopping the substance, the compulsive behavior in a framework perhaps of treatment, and treatment can come in many forms, mutual support with others going through the same thing, that can come in many forms, help outside of oneself, which comes in many forms. What is important is to be in the now of the grief and the loss, because what's ahead will come. It'll come. And we need not know what that is because it will be similar and different. Will it be a form of loss, an experience of loss? Yes. Will there be grieving? Yes. Will it shape and be different? Yeah, it will be. All of those things. And I like to highlight that because when I work with people, either the individual themselves suffering with the addiction and the loved ones equally suffering in their own way with family addiction or relationship addiction, I like to point out the importance of staying in the present, which is so difficult to do because often we want to do anything but be in the present with the painful feelings that grief creates and that loss creates. I don't want to be here. I want the world and the ground to open and me to just go right into it. I don't want to be in any of this. So I'm saying this succinctly, and it's extraordinarily difficult to do, not impossible, and really difficult to do. Staying in the now, and there's lots of ways to do that, and lots of support people who can help others stay in the now, is exactly the medicine for hanging on to what's coming, because what's coming will be different, will change. And if we take all of that in one bite, it can be incredibly overwhelming. And that can be even more devastating for people. To go with the long road, I will never hold her hand again. I will never go out to dinner with him again. I will never go on vacation with them again. I mean, these kind of thoughts that we naturally as humans have, we go into the future. I like to say, let's talk about staying right here because that's way too daunting for us. It's too much. And that's a lot of what addiction recovery is being in the present with the loss, with the working at staying abstinent, which is work, working at having a craving, moving through it to the next hour or the evening or the next day, learning from others. So there's a lot of work encapsulated in the here and now of the day that I'm inviting people to stay present with when it comes to grief and loss.
Yeah, I think it's neat when you sort of are able to say, so this is what it's going to be like. Most of the time we have addictive behaviors because we don't know how to experience and express ourselves in relationships, in emotions, in conflict, in difficulties. We just don't know how to be human. And so every minute of every day is another, it's like we're in a minefield, and we've learned if we can just mask that with a little, in my case, sugar. For other people, it's, alcohol, drugs, gambling. If we could just do something, we don't have to notice that we're walking through a minefield. But when you take all that away, I'm suddenly left with a lifetime of stuff that I didn't want to feel in the first place, and helping people to just don't be worrying about the future. This is enough. Try to just do this today, and
That's it.
helping them. You should feel that way. What you're feeling is great because you're feeling. Let's just try to feel it. So helping them normalize their experience that it's more than just missing their drugs. Their entire body misses the system they developed so they didn't have to deal with life on life's terms.
Yeah, the one thing that I work with people on regularly, and I believe people find a lot of solace in, if only in the moments they're sitting with me in therapy, is having a roadmap for the near future. So I show up as a bit of I show up as a little bit of a compass, and I will say, just what you're describing, Barbara. Yeah, this is expected. You're going to feel bored. That's right. Or a client will come in and say, God, I just don't know what to do with myself. I feel so bored. It's not as exciting. I'm boring. In the early weeks and months of sobriety, we will say, in the addiction arena, we'll say sobriety. And I will say, yeah, that's right. Let's talk about what boredom is like. And I will share, this is what's expected, in fact. I will also share with family members who perhaps have someone who's gone off to residential treatment and they're uncertain and ambiguous about what to expect or how are they supposed to be now that they are not in a front row seat with their loved one where a lot of chaos and drama may have been happening from the drinking, drugs, and compulsive behaviors, the addiction, and yet they're left, whoa, I'm in the wind here. I don't know. And we will talk about, that's right. it's going to feel quieter. It's going to feel, I say the word awkward sometimes. It's going to seem like I have a blindfold on and there's a map, but I don't have access to the map to know where this is kind of headed. And I like to say kind of because we don't go too far down the map. We don't go that far. We stay, years ago, AAA would put out these paper triptychs when people would travel across the country or big trips. And my family and I were road trippers growing up, and we would be in the station wagon and we would have the triptych. And the triptych, each page you flipped had a different section of the road you're going to go. I like to say, we're not going to go too far down in the chapters. No, no, we stay right here. But it sure does help when someone can hold your hand and guide you and say, this is what to expect on this page of the map. You're right. You're right. The feelings are all right. And of course, all the feelings are all right. There's no right or wrong, good or bad feelings. Even people say positive or negative feelings. Well, they may feel painful or they may feel good, yet all feelings are all right because they're generated from us and it's part of the human experience. The other thing I want to mention about addiction, and I'm so glad you said about the addictive behaviors, because at the point of stopping the substance or the compulsive behavior, and again, this is hard work, this is no walk in the park, the focus is on the behavior. And for simplicity's sake, I'll talk about the bottle of alcohol, let's say, putting down the alcohol and saying, okay, that I'm gonna not do that, and now I'm getting help and support to not do that. So there's the abstinence. The behaviors are the central element that I work with people on. I do not dip too far in to the reasons why. And you mentioned the reasons why of not wanting to feel or having trauma or feeling social anxiety, which people talk a lot about too in early sobriety. Yes, 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 all of that is relevant. Not yet, because I think, and I think sometimes therapists will do a disservice to clients by wanting to bring that forward. So I'm so glad you brought up that topic and go away from the behavior and go further into the reasons why the addiction generated in the first place. I like to say, not yet, because when we dip too far into that, and I'll say this to all the folks who are watching, when you dip too far into that, it gets us away from the essential work of not picking up the drink. That's essential. And that takes so much work in the early days, weeks, and months that is the central item that needs to be focused on. The reasons why, they can come, they're not going anywhere, because we as individuals who may be struggling with substances or compulsive behaviors, we carry that with us. That's part of our lived experience. That's going to be there when the time is right to start to investigate that. And the time is right when a person has enough abstinence and distance from the substance. I like to say they have enough sober capital. They've grown that muscle that I can actually be abstinent and stay sober. And now I can start taking a look at what was behind the curtain on that. Yes, trauma. Yes, family of origin things. Yes, we know that there's a genetic link that goes through intergenerationally, one's parent, grandparent, further back, one's culture's beliefs and messages about drinking, drugging, and compulsive behaviors. All of that comes into play when we start to understand the why for the person. And we now know a lot about neuroscience. And I believe that addiction is a medical disease, that it changes the main organ, which is the brain. And so people will get confounded by, I understand why I drank. I understand it. Why the heck do I keep going back to drinking? Some of that, people may argue this of more or less, but I might say some of that for this conversation is the neurological and the brain addiction. And it's confounding. And in recovery work, 12-step recovery work, like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, people will say it's baffling, right? Baffling that I keep going back to that thought that I want to drink, or the body sensations that I want to pick up the drink, or people who actually pick up the drink and return to use or relapse, we used to say. That's the confounding nature of it, but we then introduce and bring in the understanding of the neuroscience of what's there around that. Why does that keep happening? It's a powerful addiction
Mhm.
through the
Because
brain.
things have gotten wired together in your nervous system that didn't go together. So if you're like, 14 years old, socially awkward, and you walk into a party and someone gives you a beer, and your brain says, oh, that's social anxiety, and that beer, oh yeah, okay. And the minute that your brain says, there's my mommy, it will never forget that. So
Yeah,
whenever your nervous system is feeling that social anxiety, there is a part of your wiring that will say, well, then get a beer.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
just, what do you not understand about that? So that
Mm,
understanding, your brain literally rewired itself. This isn't an attitude problem. This is a
totally.
wiring.
It's really similar to what you were talking about earlier, Barbara, with family members, parents, certainly, partners and spouses, yes, good friends with other good friends or life companions, where the loss of someone through death will leave folks feeling like they've lost a limb, right? People will say things like that, or my other half, or my better half, or I'm nothing without them. The ways that we hear this in society, but also we hear it in the work we do as helpers, it is absolutely a parallel path that I will say, we need to call out for those who are working at giving up the substance or the compulsive behavior because it feels like that for those people as well. I am I am cutting off my right arm, so to speak, if I give up the booze. It sounds paradoxical because look at all the damage and danger and pain that the booze has caused when I drink and am drunk, and then I'm addicted and I'm an alcoholic. Lots of pain all around. And for the individual, it really feels like that. I cannot live without it. I don't know how I'm going to go on another day. It is really synonymous with that. I believe that the addiction is actually an attachment disorder because the person, let's say the person who's drinking, drugging, compulsive behaviors, the person has an attachment to that behavior, to that, and then to that identity of who they are. The attachment is so strong, like relationship attachments we have to people, like the attachment that infant has to primary caregiver, often mother or primary parent. It's that deep. And so we get to understand through that lens of how profound it is when people are helped, supported, sometimes forced, a bit motivated to give up something that is so dear to them. It is profound. And it's incredibly difficult.
And I think that what works for people in inpatient care is they're surrounded by people who get them. And so they don't have to ask to have their needs met. If they show up in the community room looking ragged, people say, hey, what's going on? So they get those needs met. People look in their eyes and they start to get the kind of being seen and known, people that are glad to be with them even in their messiest parts. And that starts to work and their nervous system starts to calm down and starts to learn to live in that space instead of somewhere else. But if it takes the first 18 months of your life
Yeah,
for your brain to wire normal, relational normal, nobody goes to rehab for 18 months, like 30 days and you're out, or
that's right.
even a 6-month program. Even if that's working every day, if it's very relational and your brain's getting those relational needs met and learning to share more honestly and be seen. 6 months is you have to have the support available on the outside. So I
Yeah.
think we lose a lot of people to relapse because they're in this lovely relational bubble when they're inpatient, but if they don't stick around for the outpatient or have supportive groups, I tell people the 12 steps are amazing, and if we all lived according to the 12 traditions, the world would be a better place.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
wouldn't matter if it was a quilting group. If they just love having you come and you all enjoy one together, you would
Yeah.
still get that same oxytocin. Okay, I can make it through one more day.
That's right. I can make it through one more day. I'd like to say two things in response to what you're describing and what I'm hearing. The first thing is, those of us in the field of addiction treatment and recovery would love to have longer treatments, which is not reality, actually, in the contemporary field for a myriad of reasons that we're not going to talk about now, but some of us know what that is. We would love that because actually the research shows the longer people stay in treatment with abstinence, the better the actual, and I don't use this word a lot, but I'll use it in the form of organizations that do the work of residential treatment and other forms of treatment, the better the outcome of ongoing sobriety will be. We see that we have the data. That's not always reality. Okay, so we know that. The second thing so just here to what you're saying. The second thing I'd like to say is the um, process of becoming sober and then continuing and sustaining sobriety is a paradoxical experience, like the grief and loss experiences of losing a loved one to death. Because, and for a few reasons, but I'll just highlight one because I thought of it as you were talking. So thank you for that thought came to my attention. Because we will emphasize the importance of going outside of yourself for help. You're describing the treatment program where like-minded others are also struggling, investigating, learning to be sober with people who understand, with professionals who will help, who will be with the group, who will be with those in residence or those in care. And there's time for that. So reaching outside of oneself, right? And then you say, and the 12-step programs out in the community, which are free, which are all across the globe, right? That there's help everywhere, but residential, outpatient, which would be not residential or not in a hospital, but the work that I do, the work that you do in the community. There's helping that we ask for outside of ourselves. And I would say that is incredibly important always, but incredibly important that we look to that and lean on that when we are looking to have a replacement for the very things that we now have a massive hole with, which is the drink, the drug, and the compulsive behavior, kind of like the person. When that massive hole and loss and missing the person to death, similar. So reaching outside of oneself, incredibly important, and leaning on others who can help build the scaffolding of a person to come back to life. The paradox is this: we also invite people all the time in this work of addiction treatment and recovery to do their own work, that they have to do the work. So that is similar to the grief and loss process of losing a loved one to death, that reaching out, absolutely. I'm going to go to that grief group. I'm going to go to that special service at my church or synagogue or temple for grieving for widows, or, and the list goes on and on. There's support groups online. There's literature. There's actual specialized mental health centers for grief and loss around the country, including in the Bay Area, where I am, the San Francisco Bay Area. So we invite that, and also we acknowledge with people, and you have to show up to do the work. I can't do it for you. There's the paradox. And in that, I reach out for help and someone will be there to hold my hand. I'm also helping myself pull up so I can go on another day. It's a paradox of receiving help and helping myself, which is the model of addiction recovery. And I
Right.
might say grief recovery.
They're so very similar. People who have never worked in addiction. So I worked at the Salvation Army in residential treatment. So watching them day after day, all day long, it's exactly the same. Watching them go into that coma of withdrawal and barely knowing who they are, what they're doing, and starting to show up. It's the very same with grief caused by death or divorce or
Yeah.
getting fired from your favorite job you ever had in your life, or yeah. So just finishing up, if you could leave us, I always ask people at the end of my panels, what is your 1 minute wisdom, the takeaway that you would want people to have? If they don't remember anything else you and I talk about in this great conversation, if we know they got this, we did our job.
Absolutely. Thanks, Barbara, for the opportunity. A 1 minute reminder for people and perhaps a reassurance for people that as you move through your own grief and loss process, whether it's new, expected, unanticipated, or familiar, we know that it will be uncertain, ambiguous, cloudy or foggy, confounding at times. And the reminder for people is that we expect that it will be that. And people don't like to hear this, but I'll say it anyway. There is a reason for that we even don't even need to know that at the time. That you hear me describing the process of grieving that moves over time. I'm not saying it gets better. I don't know that I would say that. I'm not every other person to be able to say that for your own unique circumstance. I'd like to say it is okay to let go of needing to know what to do next, needing to have the right answer for people, needing to know the exact message to say to somebody when they ask, how are you doing? Saying, I don't know is good enough. Saying, I'm not sure today is great. And holding a little more acceptance for yourself that it's okay not to know when we are grieving and when we are experiencing a loss. That is part of the process. I welcome anyone to reach out to me through Barbara, through me, if anyone would like help and if I can be of service. Thanks, Barbara, for this time together with you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And I will have all your contact information in the notes in the YouTube, because I finally learned how to do that. And contact information, any books that you recommend, any links that you want to share with people will all be in there. So I encourage people to check that, click that little more in the title there and see what's down there. And thank you so much for hanging out. It's been great talking to you. And I
Likewise.
look forward to seeing you again in the future.
We will.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.